The air in the cave is thick with the scent of wet fur, wood smoke, and the metallic tang of drying blood. It's a cold so deep it feels like it's trying to snap your bones, the kind of ice age winter that makes the silence outside feel heavy and hostile. You sit by a fire that is the only thing standing between you and a world of darkness. And for the first time in your life, you aren't looking at the shadows with fear. You're looking at the creature sitting just beyond the reach of the heat. It is a wolf, lean and powerful, its eyes reflecting the orange flicker of the flames. It doesn't snarl. It doesn't move to attack. Instead, it lets out a long, slow breath, a plume of white vapor that mingles with your own. You feel a strange vibration in your chest, not from a growl, but from the realization that this predator has decided you are worth more to it alive than dead. We've always been told that we were the masters of this story, that we reached out into the wild and tamed the monster to serve our needs, but the truth is much stranger and far more humbling. The story of how the wolf became the dog isn't a story of human conquest, but a story of a predator making a calculated choice to change its own destiny. But if the world outside was already theirs, why would a creature of the forest ever choose the world of the fire? To understand that choice, you have to look at the world as it was 30,000 years ago, a landscape of brutal efficiency where every calorie was paid for in blood. The northern hemisphere was a massive, frozen chessboard, and the wolves were the undisputed kings of the board. They weren't the small, scattered packs we see today. These were megafaunal wolves, larger and more robust, designed to take down mammoths and bison, but being at the top of the food chain is a dangerous, exhausting business. A single kick from a terrified caribou could shatter a wolf's jaw, turning a prime hunter into a starving scavenger in seconds. The mortality rate was staggering, and the competition was even worse. You had cave lions, massive hyenas, and giant short-faced bears all vying for the same dwindling herds. In this world, survival wasn't about being the strongest. It was about finding the edge, the one variable that made the next meal a little more certain. For most wolves, humans were just another competitor, a strange, upright primate with no claws and no fur who was barely worth the effort of hunting. But for a few, the humans were something else entirely. They were a walking, breathing opportunity. Could it be that the most dangerous thing in the woods wasn't the predator, but the predictable waste it left behind? Biologists like the late Raymond Coppinger argued that we've been looking at domestication all wrong. We imagine an ancient hunter-gatherer stumbling upon a litter of wolf pups, bringing them home and raising them as pets. It's a nice image, but it's almost certainly a myth. Real wolves are incredibly difficult to tame, even when raised from birth by humans. Their flight distance, the distance at which they feel the need to run away from a threat, is hardwired into their nervous systems. What likely happened was far less romantic. It was a process of self-selection. In any given population of wolves, there is a natural variation in temperament. Some are bolder, some are more fearful, and some are just a little bit more curious. When humans began setting up semi-permanent camps, they created a new ecological niche, the trash heap. Humans were extraordinarily messy eaters. We would kill a large animal, eat the calorie-dense organs and fat, and leave behind piles of lean meat and cracked bones. To a wolf struggling to survive a lean winter, these middens were a goldmine. The fearful wolves stayed far away, missing out on the easy calories. The aggressive wolves were speared or driven off because they were too dangerous to have around. But the friendly wolves, the ones with a slightly shorter flight distance, could stick around long enough to scavenge. They ate better, they lived longer, and they passed those friendly genes onto their pups. But what does it actually take to turn a killer's brain into a companion's heart? The answer came from a bizarre and famous experiment in Siberia started in 1959 by a geneticist named Dmitry Belayev. He wanted to see if he could recreate the domestication of the dog using wild silver foxes. He didn't train them. He simply selected the ones that showed the least amount of fear toward humans and allowed them to breed. Within just a few generations, something incredible happened. The foxes didn't just become tamer. Their physical appearance began to change. Their ears became floppy, their tails started to curl, and their coats developed white patches. This is what scientists call domestication syndrome. It happens because the genes that control the fight or flight response are linked to the genes that control physical development in the womb. By selecting for tameness, Belayev was accidentally selecting for a reduction in adrenaline and an increase in social hormones like oxytocin. The wolves at the edge of the human camps were going through the exact same transformation. Their skulls were shrinking, their teeth were becoming smaller, and their brains were being rewired to see humans not as a threat, but as a social partner. This wasn't a choice made in a single moment, but a slow, biological drift that lasted for thousands of years. But if the wolves were changing to fit our world, how much of our world was being built around them? By the time we reached the peak of the last ice age, the relationship had moved from scavenging to an active partnership. Anthropologist Pat Shipman, in her groundbreaking work The Invaders, suggests that this alliance was the secret weapon that allowed modern humans to conquer the planet. While our cousins, the Neanderthals, were incredibly strong and intelligent, there is no evidence they ever formed a bond with wolves. They hunted alone or in small groups, using brute force to take down large prey. Modern humans, however, had the wolf dog. Think about the tactical advantage. A wolf can smell a mammoth from miles away and track it through a blizzard. It can harrying a herd, isolating the weak and the old, and hold an animal in place while the humans close in with projectile weapons. This division of labor was a game changer. The humans provided the killing blow from a distance, and the wolves provided the tracking and the containment. Shipman argues that this synergy was so effective, it may have been the primary reason Neanderthals went extinct. We didn't just outthink them, we out-hunted them because we had a multi-species army. The archaeological record backs this up. At sites like the Goyet Cave in Belgium, researchers have found dog-like skulls dating back 31,000 years, buried alongside enormous piles of mammoth bones. These weren't wild kills. These were organized industrial-scale harvests, but if we were using them as tools of war and hunting, when did the relationship become personal? The shift from utility to empathy is one of the most profound moments in our history, and we can see it in the dirt. At a site in Germany called Bonn Oberkassel, archaeologists discovered a grave from 14,000 years ago containing a man, a woman, and a dog. But it wasn't just any dog. Analysis of the dog's teeth showed that it had contracted a severe case of canine distemper when it was just a few months old. This is a brutal, agonizing disease that would have made the animal completely useless for hunting or guarding. It would have needed constant care, cleaning, and feeding for weeks just to survive. Yet the humans in this camp kept it alive. They cared for it until it eventually died of other causes years later, and then they buried it with themselves. This is the first clear evidence of an emotional bond that transcended the work the animal could do. It shows that by 14,000 years ago, the wolf had already crossed the threshold from a tool into a family member. We were no longer just two predators sharing a kill. We were two species sharing a life. This emotional bridge is built on a biological trick that is unique to dogs. Researchers at Eötvös Loránd University in Hungary have shown that dogs are the only animals that will look a human in the eye to seek help when they are confused. A wolf, even one raised by humans, will simply try to solve the problem itself or give up. Dogs have evolved a specific muscle over their eyes, the levator anguli oculi medialis, which allows them to make puppy dog eyes, a facial expression that triggers a nurturing response in the human brain. We aren't just imagining that they love us. They have literally evolved the hardware to make us love them. But how deep does that hardware go into their actual DNA? Recent genetic studies have uncovered something even more startling. It turns out that the friendliness of dogs might be the result of a genetic mutation that, in humans, causes a condition called Williams-Beuren syndrome. People with this syndrome are characterized by an almost overwhelming desire to seek out social interaction and a lack of social inhibition. They are hypersociable. In 2017, evolutionary biologist Bridget von Hold discovered that dogs have specific mutations in the same chromosomal region, specifically genes GTF2I and GTF2IRD1, that are absent in wolves. This means that on a fundamental genetic level, a dog is a wolf with a social disability that makes it crave our company. We didn't just tame them. We selected for a kind of beautiful permanent cognitive glitch that makes them biologically incapable of being alone. This mutation is what allows them to do things no other animal can, like understanding human pointing. If you point at a bowl of food, a dog will look where you are pointing. A chimpanzee, our closest relative, will just look at your finger. Dogs have evolved to tune into our frequency, to read our micro-expressions and our tone of voice in a way that is arguably more sophisticated than our own communication. They are the only species on Earth that has traded its wild independence for a permanent seat at our table. But in that trade, did they lose something that can never be replaced? The cost of this transformation is written in the bones of modern wolves and the bodies of modern dogs. When a wolf chose to stay by the fire, it was trading its physical power for a safer life. Over generations, the brain of the dog shrank by nearly 20% compared to its wild ancestors. Parts of the brain associated with sensory processing and problem-solving in the wild simply withered away because they weren't needed anymore. The humans were doing the thinking. The dogs just had to do the feeling. This is the great paradox of the dog. They are arguably the most successful mammal on the planet besides us, numbering nearly 1 billion individuals. But that success is entirely dependent on their relationship with a species that is notoriously fickle. If humans were to disappear tomorrow, the vast majority of dog breeds would follow us into extinction within a few years. They have become so specialized for life in our shadow that the wild has been completely bred out of them. We see this in the way they hunt. Most domestic dogs have a fragmented hunting sequence. In a wolf, the sequence is search, stalk, chase, grab bite, kill bite, and eat. In dogs, we have bred them to stop at certain points. A border collie has an exaggerated stalk, but a suppressed kill bite. A retriever has an exaggerated grab, but a very soft mouth. We have taken the unified lethal spirit of the wolf and broken it into pieces to serve our hobbies. But even as we've manipulated their bodies, they have subtly manipulated our society. Can we truly say we are the ones in control when they have convinced us to provide them with food, shelter, and medical care for no functional return? Look at the way they have changed our history. It wasn't just the hunting or the protection from Neanderthals. Dogs allowed us to become pastoralists. Without dogs to herd and protect livestock, the transition from hunter-gatherer to farmer would have been significantly more difficult, if not impossible. They allowed us to settle in one place because they provided the perimeter defense that kept our grain and our animals safe from other predators. They accompanied us across the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas, and they were with us when we sailed to the remotest islands of the Pacific. Every major human migration of the last 15,000 years has featured a four-legged shadow. We think of ourselves as the great explorers, the ones who conquered the frontiers, but we never did it alone. We had a partner that could hear the danger we couldn't hear and smell the path we couldn't see. Even today, in our climate-controlled cities, we still carry that ancient partnership in our nervous systems. When you pet a dog, your blood pressure drops, your heart rate slows, and your brain releases a flood of oxytocin, the same hormone that bonds a mother to her child. It's a biological feedback loop that has been running for 30 millennia. The wolf didn't just choose to live near our fires, it chose to live inside our hearts. But does that mean the wolf is truly gone? Or is it just waiting for the fire to go out? There is a haunting quality to the way we treat the descendants of those ancient wolves today. We dress them in sweaters, we give them human names, and we feed them processed kibble that looks nothing like the raw meat of the Ice Age. We've turned the apex predator of the Northern Hemisphere into a creature that is afraid of vacuum cleaners and thunder. But every now and then you see a flash of the original choice. You see it when a dog hears a siren and lifts its head to howl, a sound that is identical to the one its ancestors used to coordinate a mammoth kill. You see it in the way a dog will circle 3 times before lying down on a plush rug, a vestigial behavior from a time when it had to pack down the tall grass of the tundra to check for snakes and cold spots. The wolf is still there, buried under layers of genetic friendliness and human interference, and perhaps that's the real reason we keep them around. They are a living link to a version of ourselves that we have almost forgotten, a version that was wild and hungry and deeply connected to the rhythm of the natural world. They are the witnesses to our entire history as a species. They saw us when we were huddled in caves, and they see us now as we reach for the stars. But what happens when the species they chose to follow starts to lose its own way? The relationship is currently facing its greatest challenge yet. As we become more disconnected from the natural world, we are putting more and more pressure on dogs to fulfill emotional roles they were never designed for. We expect them to be fur babies, to live in small apartments, and to never show a hint of the predatory drive that allowed them to survive the Ice Age in the first place. When a dog misbehaves, when it bites or chases or barks, we often treat it as a moral failing rather than a biological reality. We've forgotten the terms of the original contract. They didn't come to us to be toys, they came to us to be partners. And when we deny them their nature, we see the rise of behavioral issues that are almost unheard of in wild populations. Anxiety, aggression, and obsessive-compulsive behaviors are the diseases of civilization for dogs. We are making them as neurotic as we are. Yet, despite the ways we've distorted their bodies and their minds, their loyalty remains absolute. It is a one-sided devotion that is almost frightening in its intensity. A dog will stay with a human who treats it poorly, who starves it, or who ignores it because its DNA tells it that there is no life outside of the human shadow. They have nowhere else to go. The wild world that they walked away from 30,000 years ago is gone, replaced by a world of concrete and fences that they cannot navigate without us. They are our prisoners as much as they are our friends. But if we are the ones who hold the leash, why do we feel so lost without them? Consider the story of the Chernobyl dogs. When the nuclear reactor melted down in 1986, and the human population was forced to flee, they were told to leave their pets behind. The soldiers were ordered to shoot any animal they saw to prevent the spread of radiation, but some survived. Today, the descendants of those abandoned dogs still live in the exclusion zone. They have reverted to a semi-wild state, forming packs and hunting for food. But they haven't become wolves again. They still seek out the researchers who visit the zone, wagging their tails and looking for human contact, even though no human has lived there for decades. They are a haunting reminder that the choice the wolves made all those years ago was permanent. They have been biologically branded by their association with us. They can never truly go back to the forest, and they can never truly leave our side. They are the ghosts of the Ice Age, living in a world that has no place for them except as our reflections. It makes you wonder, did the wolf choose us because we were special, or did it choose us because it saw that we were just as lonely and vulnerable as they were? As we move further into the 21st century, the science of our bond is only getting deeper. We are discovering that dogs can detect the chemical signatures of human fear and sadness in our sweat. We are learning that they can identify the early stages of Parkinson's disease and cancer with a precision that rivals our best medical technology. They are still the scouts at the edge of the camp. Only the camp is now a modern hospital, and the danger is a microscopic mutation in our cells. The partnership is evolving, but the core of it remains the same. It is a negotiation between two very different kinds of intelligence, a bridge across the species gap that should never have been built. We took the most dangerous creature in our world and invited it into our most private spaces. And in return, the wolf gave up its majesty to become something that could love us. It is the most successful, most tragic, and most beautiful deal in the history of life on Earth. But as you look at the dog sleeping at your feet, you have to ask yourself a quiet follow-up question. Was the wolf's choice an act of survival, or was it the greatest mistake any predator ever made? In the end, we like to think we understand the animals in our lives. We project our own feelings onto them, we give them voices in our heads, and we assume they see the world the way we do. But the dog is a reminder that there is a profound, unbridgeable mystery at the heart of our existence. They are the only beings that have seen us as we truly are, unfiltered, terrified, and triumphant for 30,000 years, and they still chose to stay. They know our secrets better than we do. They know the sound of our heartbeat and the smell of our adrenaline. They have watched us build empires and burn them down, and their only concern has been whether there was a place for them by the fire. We have spent millennia trying to civilize them, but perhaps the real purpose of the dog was to keep us just a little bit wild, to remind us that we are still animals, still tied to the cycle of the seasons and the reality of the hunt. They are the tether that keeps us connected to the earth, even as we try to leave it behind. But what happens when that tether finally snaps? We are entering an era where the biological reality of the dog is being replaced by digital substitutes. There are robotic dogs that don't need to be fed, AI companions that don't shed, and virtual pets that can never die. We are trying to keep the companionship while stripping away the animal. But a robot can't smell your fear. A machine can't feel the vibration of a growl in its chest. When we replace the living, breathing descendant of the wolf with a synthetic imitation, we aren't just losing a pet, we are losing a part of ourselves. We are losing the one creature that made the choice to walk with us when the world was cold and dark. The wolf didn't choose ancient humans because we were comfortable. It chose us because we were dangerous and vital. And if we lose that vitality, if we retreat into a world of sterile simulations, we are breaking the contract that was signed in the blood and wood smoke of the Ice Age. We are leaving the wolf alone in the dark again. You think you are the one who chose the dog. You think you went to a shelter or a breeder and made a conscious decision to bring an animal into your home. You think you are the master of the leash and the provider of the food. But look at your hand as it rests on that fur. Look at the way those eyes follow your every move, tracking your emotions with the same precision their ancestors used to track a wounded bison. The undeniable, cold reality is that you are not the master of this relationship. You are the subject of a 30,000-year-old experiment in parasitic survival. The wolf didn't become a dog to serve you. It became a dog to survive you. It hacked your brain, exploited your nurturing instincts, and mutated its own DNA just to ensure that you would never let it go. Your best friend is actually an evolutionary strategist that has successfully enslaved your emotions to guarantee its own genetic immortality. You didn't tame the wolf. The wolf tamed you, and it did such a perfect job that you will spend the rest of your life and the rest of our history as a species happily paying the price for a choice that was never yours to make. But now that you know the truth, would you ever really want to be free? Or are you just as afraid of the dark as they are?